I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg testified before a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Thursday. He faced questions from Senator Susan Collins, who pressed the Transportation Secretary on a Federal Highway Administration memo that discourages states from moving ahead with projects that, quote, add highway capacity. Collins asked if Buttigieg will rescind or revise a controversial memo relating to such spending that she says has, quote, caused a lot of angst. Here's what Buttigieg had to say.
Secretary, I mentioned in my opening statement the Federal Highway Administration's memorandum that discourages states from moving ahead with projects that add highway capacity and instead indicates that federal funds should be used to prioritize projects that improve existing surface transportation needs. I know this is a major issue for Senator Capito, who was the co-author of the EPW title that was included in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which clearly allows states to choose which investments they fund using their federal aid highway dollars. Congress clearly, on a bipartisan basis, rejected the idea that DOT is advocating for in the December memo. So I'm going to ask you a very straightforward way, will you rescind or revise that memo?
So I would be happy to clarify the memo if it's continuing to cause confusion. But it was crafted in a way to take great care to emphasize the importance that anything that Federal Highway Administration does must be compatible with the law as written. And our intent and our practice is to do just that.
I think that that clarification would be really helpful because I can assure you from talking to my colleagues and state commissioners that this guidance has created a lot of angst and concern, and it is in conflict with our intent. I want to next switch to the issue of mega projects versus raise grants. And as I said, I think combining funding could mean that all even or most of the funding is awarded to these gigantic projects which simply don't exist in smaller rural states. And so do you intend to allocate a certain percentage of raise grants to ensure that rural states and communities will be able to receive that funding as they have in the past?
So it's very important to us to make sure that smaller communities and rural communities get support from this legislation and from these programs specifically. And we've sought to not only meet statutory requirements, but go above and beyond where appropriate. And one example I would offer is that in the last cycle for the infra grants, I think legislatively there was a 25% set aside for rural projects. We wound up actually doing not 25 but 44%, so almost doubling that. Likewise, when we look at the combined notices of funding opportunity, in no way is that intended to diminish the access of smaller projects or smaller communities to the funds. In fact, part of the spirit of why we're doing that is the recognition that it's often smaller communities or counties or transportation authorities that find it more difficult to navigate the multiplicity of federal programs and processes. And so with the same mentality that led to, for example, the Common College application, so that a parent wouldn't have to fill in the same zip code on 7 different pieces of paper, that we have some common processes that mean instead of back-to-back application cycles or perhaps a project that would qualify for multiple programs having to go through the motions repeatedly, that we roll that up and effectively streamline the process. So my point is that that's aimed to be in the spirit of making this more user-friendly for all communities, including small communities. And you have my commitment that smaller and rural projects will not be shorted in the RAISE program or any other provided under the law.
Thank you. I don't think I have time to start another question, so I'll wait for the next round.